Welcome to the Observability Podcast. Today on the podcast, we're joined by our dear friend Daniel Ellsweig, a global architect for observability and enterprise management at Coty. With over 4 decades of experience in technology, Dan has witnessed and shaped the evolution of enterprise management systems from the early days of assembly language programming to today's AI-driven solutions. Today, we'll explore his fascinating career journey, discuss the future of enterprise management, and get his insights on the responsible implementation of AI in critical systems. Along the way, we might even talk about some goats. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, episode 3. And this is one that we've been talking about since before we filmed the first one. So today, me and Tim are honored and thrilled to but to have Dan Ellsweig from Coty joining us today. Truly, when we talk on this show about people who have worked in observability for a long time, so in other words, not just theoretical, but they've actually had to struggle with finding observability and then tuning it, Dan is first and foremost on that list. So Dan, thank you so much for joining. How are the goats?
Oh, the goats are just wonderful. I just gave them their afternoon pumpkin, and they love their pumpkins. In a couple of weeks, they'll be getting Christmas trees. We have the entire neighborhood. We tell them when they're done with their pumpkins, bring them up here. The goats love them. You smash them, and they eat from the inside out.
Do they don't eat the outside rind, they eat the internal fruit, I
They eat
guess?
the rind right down to the 16th inch of skin. That's all that's left.
Wow.
And if they don't get it, the chickens do. So
Hey, before we talk about IT stuff, I think everybody's going to want to know about your goat herd.
Yeah,
Talk
I
a
know.
little bit about, like, you live in Connecticut, right? And you've had a herd talk about that.
yeah, I'm in upstate New York, actually, about an
Upstate,
hour,
okay.
hour and a half northwest of the city.
Close enough.
Um,
Connecticut, New
yeah.
York, right? Yeah,
About
close enough.
10 years ago, we just, on a whim, bought some chickens, you know, and said, okay, what do we do now? We got to build a house for the chickens. So we built a house, and it was crooked, and we didn't level the land, and we came up with a name for our farm, Crooked Hen House Farms. So
Nice.
we are Crooked Hen House Farms. About a year later, my wife got the idea, oh, we'll get some goats and we'll milk them, and it'll be great. She comes home with 2 male goats, and I'm like, I think we have a problem here, you know. So we, after a little biology lesson, and we figured it all out, and we've got our first 2 goats, and the rest is history. Our herd ranges at about 20 goats normally, mostly females. We usually have 1 or 2 studs on hand. This is the first year we moved away from that. We're trying chemistry this year, science instead. So we're waiting for the results. We don't know yet. But
And if
we
that
did it.
works, when will the baby goats be here?
They'll be here in February, March timeframe. So they're 150 days, and they'll always pick the worst day of the year. There'll be a blizzard, and it'll be freezing, and it'll be 2 a.m, guaranteed.
Wow. And you'll be out there at the barn.
Yep, we assist.
That's crazy.
You know, I don't know if you've ever seen Dr. Pol on TV.
I have, yeah.
He's my hero. Yeah, he's taught me everything I know. But actually, I've taught myself computers and networking and all that nice stuff. I taught myself veterinary medicine. And when you have 20 goats and 5 dogs and 6 cats and ducks and chickens, you can't be running to the vet. You'll go broke. And you know, what they have the advantage of is the prescription pad. So you have a real good rapport with your vet, and she approves anything I need. I didn't say that on the air, but
Wow. Yeah.
anything we need for the goats. And we take care of it. I've set bones. I deliver babies. You name it.
All right, I have to ask, with 20 goats, how much land do you need for that, roughly? Because when you say goats, I was thinking 1 or 2, right? 20?
We started with 2. Our herd was 6 for the longest time, and we had them in about 150 square pen. So 150 square foot each, or 150 feet each way, and that was plenty of room. I now have probably 4 times that size cleared and fenced. in different areas because you rotate the pet. You can't leave them in one place all the time because they eat off the ground and they poop on the ground and they get parasites when they do that. So you got to move their pastures around and cut it down and let the eggs dry out and die in the old pasture. But I would say I probably have about an acre fenced in, maybe an acre and a half fenced in, if you don't count the yard around the house. We fenced all that in too, so I can let them mow my lawn for me. I haven't mowed the lawn in 3 years.
Money saving. I like it. Yeah.
That's what they do. Yeah, you just turn them loose and they eat. That's all they do is eat the grass, make it nice and even. I couldn't do as good a job on my lawnmower.
Next, Tim and I are talking next June-ish. We want to come up to the farm, and I want
Awesome.
to do some goat yoga where they crawl on my back and everything. The little baby goat. So please tell them that we're
Tell
gonna
them
be
you're
planning.
coming.
Yes, yes.
They kind of do what they want to do. If I go in the barn and I lay down, the big goats will walk all over me. They don't care if they're big or small.
That's awesome.
But these guys, we raise primarily a breed called Nigerian dwarfs, and so full grown they're about 40 pounds, medium dog size.
Okay.
So we have some Nubians which are a little bigger, and a Tannenberg that's a little bigger. They're really good milk goats, but primarily we milk them. We sell the babies. So last year we kept one baby. We sold 20.
That sounds harsh.
Harsh. No. I will not sell. If I know you're going to eat Bambi here, you're not getting Bambi.
You're not getting it. Right. Yeah.
Right. And, we meet the people, we meet the families, their kids come. It is so much fun. I open the farm up to kids holding little baby goats, and we keep them after they pick them. They'll pick them in probably March, April, and then we keep them until May until they're weaned and
I gotcha.
vaccinated and all that stuff. So you got a lot of family stuff like that going on, which is fun. And then the rest of the year we milk and make cheese and yogurt, and I love the goat yogurt.
Do you make it or do you send it to somebody else and they make it? You make it?
What are you kidding? Who are you talking to here?
Yeah, that's cool.
Hey, you do everything, Dan. Man.
It's like anything else. I mean, yes, you can buy the cultures, the New England cheese supplies. And, I can buy the cultures and make the cheese, or I can buy one packet of culture and start a starter and then tune it like we do everything else, tweak it, make it taste more buttery, make it taste more this or that. And so I have starter cultures going that have now going a couple of years, and I make my cheese from that.
How about that?
And it makes it unique. No other farm that's going to make goat cheese is going to make something that tastes the same as what I make. So it's pretty cool like that.
Well, Dan, we before we move into now, let me tell you something on this show. We like to say that there are those concentric circles, the 3 circles that tie a lot of us together. Tim and I both believe this. So we believe that IT people, men or women, okay,
Right.
yeah, little concentric circles. IT people, men or women, are also connected in an overwhelming number to music. And as in they're musicians. In many cases, IT people are musicians. It's uncanny.
It's math.
Connection.
Music is math. I mean,
Music is math. And Tim, I always talk about Tim because here he has been for so many years, sort of a guru of software development, but he actually went to school for music. So he actually has a music degree.
Yeah.
Isn't that
And so
cool?
in the same manner, Dan, many people would not know this, but Dan's a Deadhead, so he's big into the Grateful
But
Dead.
I'm a bass player. I've played in
Oh, that's
many,
awesome.
through high school, garage bands, college, after college. I haven't played in a few years. My fingers would bleed if I played now. But I had the roughest rough cut strings I could have, man. I love those things. Make your fingers bleed.
You sent me a picture. Now I'm not pulling it up today, but Dan sent me a picture when he was in college wailing on a bass. Wailing on a
Awesome.
bass. And he had
That's
long
cool.
hair and he looked like he was at Woodstock. So we have
I
that
was playing
affinity.
I was playing in a bar. We had a gig on Long Beach Island in New Jersey, where that came from. It was yeah.
Man, Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Yeah, we'll talk about the 3rd circle at the end of the podcast, but the first 2 circles, music and IT people, And so that would lead, I think both Tim and I would want to know from you, how do you go from being a musician, an artistic person in that manner, and now look at you after 40 years of working in IT now for one of the largest, cosmetics firms in the world. How does that happen?
I don't know if I could say that on a podcast, so I won't. So,
Yeah,
no,
right. Yeah.
how's it
Yeah.
happen?
As it happens. Yeah.
Music is structure, without a doubt. You don't think about it as structure, and you try and drift away from the structure as much as you can, but you're always coming back to the structure. And I think that structure attracts you. I mean, when I first got I had an 8080 processor. I had a computer, and it was structure that made it easy to use. I mean, I was drawn to assembly language at that point. How many people can say that? You know, right? And I became fluent. I mean, my first IT job, never worked in IT before. I walked in, I was having a bad day at work and coming home from work, just miserable. No tie, no resume, just want to get home. And you hear on the radio, job fair at the Marriott, and I'm driving by the Marriott. Like, okay, we're going in. So I went in and just sitting here talking like I'm talking now about stuff. And we're talking early 80s here now. So, or 70s, maybe in the late 70s. Western Union Information Systems hired me on the spot to do assembly language program for satellite TDM systems that were 6800 based. And I'd never written 6800 before, but I'm like, how different can it be? I'm an expert on it. I did that for a few years. I did that for almost 4 or 5 years, and then they tried to go out of business. So a couple of us who were having fun doing this stuff said, let's go and be consultants. Let's do that. And we went and hired guns, right? You learn how to really sell yourself. Yeah, I did that. No problem. PL1 on a PDP-11, no problem. We got that. Yeah, I'll go get a book, But the structure makes it easy. And the structure makes this easy. And, as you can see, anywhere where we lose that structure, as much as we'd like to lose it, we end up circling the wagons to try to figure out how to get back to fix it. And, I was working a problem today where they were moving a site in Brazil, moving a couple sites, combining them, and they weren't going to rename the equipment. And I'm like, guys, we go through all of this stuff to get meaningful host names so we can do stuff like this. So we can look at a host name and have a machine say, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know what it's doing, and they're like, oh, yeah, well, we'll just, you can just add another rule. You just add another rule. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it that way.
Well, what got you I know that you spent some time at Bear Stearns, and I was curious, is that where you developed the back then, I know none of us called it observability, but is that where you developed your desire for this overview? Because we believe that observability is more than like a single thing. It's a good combination of things. So is that where it started for you?
It started, I was a consultant. Actually, I did the consulting gig for like 10 years. I worked for AT&T. I worked for IBM Professional. Worked for MCI Communications. I was out there for a while. Always low-level driver stuff, communicating, making systems talk to each other. I was writing, I was pretty good in a really weird protocol, SNA. And I was writing device drivers for Linux, for SNA, for MCI of all places. And AT&T had me come in and start working on it there. They threw a Unix box on my desk and said, have a nice day. A 3B1 pizza box. But when I finally got my first real job, I was working for Salomon Brothers on Wall Street. That was before Bear. And they were a mainframe shop. And I was originally in there to do what I was doing at AT&T, writing device drivers for the mainframe. And the CTO came in and said, okay, this weekend we're making a big change here. We bought these things called routers and switches, and we're becoming a distributed network. Anyone know how to manage this thing?
Oh, my. Nice.
And they put it just like that. They went to my group and said, what do we do now? So I got on the
Wow.
phone, and there was this thing. I had a web browser on my desk. I had Mozilla on my desk at Solomon. You could look up Star Trek and things. Not much. You could look. There were a few things you could look up. So anyway, I found that there were two companies that were on top of this. Cabletron had this product called Spectrum.
Spectrum, yeah.
and SunNet Manager. And that's how I kind of got into this. I called Cabletron, and this young guy came out to Solomon, a guy named Bob Kettles.
I
You
was
ever
gonna
hear of
say,
him?
had to be Kettles. Yeah,
Had to
right.
be Kettles.
Had to be Kettles, yeah. We all love him. Those of you who don't know him, he's a longtime fellow over at Broadcom we've all worked with, real nice guy, and he started with Cabletron maybe, what, 40-some
Right.
years ago,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was Cabletron and Prisma, Concord, CA finally, and he's still out there doing this. But his, I will say it, he really, his fever of his excitement over this stuff, he would set this stuff up for me and just get plain excited about it, and that did it. And the first chance I had to really set up a large scale system was at Bear. Bear was a convoluted system. They had a lot of stuff there. They were using HP OpenView as their main glue, but you couldn't do a lot with OpenView. So they had this really cool tool called Nerve Center. Seagate, I think, owned it at the time. I don't know if you ever saw that tool. It was basically a flow charter. It was a state machine. So you had a graphic on the screen, and you could say, okay, I'm going to make a flow chart. I'm going to put a decision point here. And in that decision point, you could write Perl code and and do it all like on the GUI. It was really cool. And the Perl code had access to all the internals, all the mib variables, all the polling stuff, all of it. So you could write plain English code around MIBs. It was awesome, and do really complex tests. And it was smart enough to remember the last poll. So you had the last value. You could do deltas. You could do all that neat stuff. Did a lot with that, and we ended up integrating that into the CMDB, into all kinds of stuff. It was very cool. But that's really where I got my excitement, and I got to play with everything out there. I mean, we had Netcool, we had Sev1. I met, what was his name? The Russian guy that wrote Sev1. He came out with it. This was his baby. He wanted us to try it,
Well, if we fast forward, so, like, you've got to start there, but, Tim and I both had a chance to see what you're doing at Coty, and, actually, it's so advanced. You mentioned even your naming conventions for your host name and how you can go,
You
around the
learn
world.
that. Well, you learn that. If you don't do the basics, you can't do the good stuff.
Yeah. What can you talk a little bit without, nothing
Yeah,
private,
yeah.
but could you talk a little bit about what you're doing at Coty? Because it is fascinating, and what you see now for your observability with what you've done and what you see in the future. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you is a little bit about our AI thing that you're using now. At the end,
Sure. We'll
Shameless
throw that
plug.
in there.
Shameless plug.
Shameless. That's all right.
Yes.
Basically, Coty was interesting because prior to Coty, I was at Avon, another cosmetics company, and the team I worked for there, it was a CA shop. We built it out. We got it going end to end. We had every piece of it working beautifully. We were using soy at the time because OI didn't exist yet. We basically transformed them to the point where people, they're like, "Wow, this is how." I don't have to tell you, the answers you get. My boss, or actually my boss's boss, left, came to Coty. A year later, he came back and got my boss, and then a year later, he came back and got me and a couple other engineers at the same time. That's how we ended up at Coty. So I've been working for this management team at Coty for 20 years now. 10 years at Coty, and we know each other pretty well, and which is great because my boss respects what I do, and he's like, do you what you do? You make my life easy. Basically, I had the opportunity to do a ground up. There was nothing at Coty when I came on board, and that's kind of why we were brought in. They had a bunch of POCs running, some bits and pieces of Tivoli, some bits and pieces of XYZ, but nothing coherent, and it was only in one data center, in the U.S. data center. So my task was to say, can we do anything what we have and make a global management system, global observability platform out of this, or do we want to start over and do it right? So I packed the first one first, and I went to IBM. And I said, look, if I were to take what you did for us and make this global, what would it cost us? and it was incredible amount of money. It was almost in the Splunk sphere.
Right.
Someplace,
Nice.
okay?
Yeah.
You
Way up
know,
there.
they
Yeah.
wanted to charge me almost $1 million for a dev system for
Wow.
licensing.
Okay.
So, and from my experience with CA, dev systems never been a problem. You spin up what you need. And, now I may have gotten in trouble with Broadcom for saying that, but, that's been the approach we've taken. It's awesome because your dev system is just that. It's your play box. It's your sandbox. And you should, you want to be able to play. You want to be able to push the bounds there.
Yeah, you make it, you break it, right?
So we built around what is now called NetOps, Spectrum and Performance Center, NFA. So we have NetFlow in there. We have VNA. So we're bringing in the non-SNMP stuff, Meraki, DNAC, all that kind of nice stuff coming in. And we tie it all together with the DXO2, their I was laughing about it. When it first came out, it was called AI Ops, and they quickly figured out there was no AI in this thing, so they renamed it, but that's okay. What's nice about it is that it's flexible, and pretty much everything we have is flexible. And the way we look at observability is there's a couple layers. The observability platform itself is OI for me. That's where you go. Everything else is just collection. I need to feed the machine. I have a teenage granddaughter. This I've never seen anyone. She's an athlete, and I've never seen anyone eat like that. And she doesn't have a gram of fat on her. And I'm like, feed the machine, Riv. But it's same thing with us. We couldn't get to where we are now with what you're trying to look at if I didn't feed the machine. And, my group, Sam and I mean, that's what we do. We kind of set the rules. When you talk about host naming and conventions and things, the important stuff to get out of the way, before we signed a license agreement, we wrote a document. And we went to the server groups. We went to the virtual groups. We went to the network groups. We went to the application groups and said, in an ideal world, what would you want to be woken up for at 2 a.m. in your world? We didn't talk about bits per second. We didn't talk about metrics. We didn't talk about tools. We just wanted to know what they expected from life, from observability. And I always use that 3 a.m. one, because if you just walk up to a manager and say, what's important, he's going to give you a list like this. And, with whether it's you're presenting a report in AI or you're doing a report, less is better, always better. You can always add. So we came up with this document, our monitoring standards document. Covers everything from threshold values for disk drives and memory to what metrics we collect. And we built that. I had similar documents at Bear and along the line, but they were after the fact documents. Document what we have, so that if you get hit by a bus, someone else could figure it out. This time I did it the other way around. And, everything from the naming conventions, and we were lucky enough that the management team at Coty was strong enough to push back. When you go in and say, look, guys, you can't have a host named Pop-Tart. It's just not going to work. And, and we've got it where I would say with our naming, we're in the 98, 99%. We're correct. And that allows us to do things in O2 with services. We, traditionally a service is payroll. Service is some application running, order management, whatever you want to call it. And we have those services. But what we said is, let's make each site a service. So, and make it a tree. So you have Coty, you have United States, and I have the 5 regions. And then in EMEA, you have France, and in France, you have Paris, and in Paris, you have Paris Metro. And inside of there, I'll have Paris Compute Services, Paris Network Services, Paris Print Services, Paris Wireless Services. So I break all my services, and that's where the meat is. That's where the alarms come from and the thresholds come from. But you couldn't do that because a virtual machine isn't going to give you his GPS coordinates, And we've had to do some things to accommodate, oh, we're not going to rename it. We just can't rename that when it's SOX compliant. The government will have a heart attack, So, okay, so we've had to do certain things, and same with some older subnets. We've had to add rules, say, well, if it's called this and it's on this subnet, it's really this, But those are exceptions. And as long as we can keep them exceptions, it makes the big system work.
Well, I'll tell you, Tim's our OI guru at the company, and I remember when you first showed us your layout, especially what you were talking about, your geographical sites, sort of blew me away. Tim, what did you think? Because I remember it was sort of it blew me away how organized his operational intelligence
Well, we
window.
found a whole new customer base by doing that. We thought our customers were the server engineers, the network engineers, the operations team, maybe into service delivery a little bit, but they're in their own world. What we found is the IT level managers, the guy who manages Southern Europe. He loves the view we give him in, the service level view. You know, he had no idea what inventory he had. He had no idea what he had. And we're giving that to him now. And we started with one in Southern Europe, and now we've got 6 regional managers on with their own views. But again, without having the glue properly done, you couldn't do stuff like that. And we're looking to try and regionalize the dashboards, so there's specific dashboards, not just the global dashboards that plug in. Anywhere we can do a view like that, and we push Sheenam and John for that all the time.
Yeah. And Sheenam, of course, was our episode 1. So she's definitely, I know she's going to see this and listen to what you had to say there.
Oh, no, I was going to say, to answer your question, Tony, it's your best practice, in my opinion, should be the rules, not the exception. So it was just amazing. I opened it up. I'm like, what do you need me for? Yeah. So,
Well, again, you go back to the experience. I mean, whether
Yes.
it was, I've played with BEM, I've played with Netcool, I've played with alarm monitors. I don't even remember the names of these things. Tivoli, or Netcool. But I mean, again, the BAM used to be Tivoli, and then they took Netcool and they gave it to BMC, and there's a bunch of stuff out there, and you can usually make stuff look pretty, but not to this level. Most of these don't have the ability to do on the back end what you need to do, and I need more out of OI. I need these guys to trust me and say, I know what I'm doing. You don't have to do it for me, and
I had to share that because you're sitting there saying something that we talk about all the time, which is,
yeah.
and Tim and I would feel the same as you. If you've been in this area of space, this observability space long enough, you have looked at every monitoring tool known to man, and
and there's
I,
some good ones out there.
yeah,
There's some
yeah.
funky ones out there.
Yeah, and but in the end, monitoring tools, I like what you said earlier about like OI and how you use that as your intelligence or your observability, because in the end, monitoring tools are there to give us great metrics, but it's sort of up to us how we determine to analyze what those metrics
Oh
mean
God!
to
And
our
we have,
company.
think of the volume of metrics that I have. I have a terabyte database for DX Ops. You know, UIM. Has got its database. Couldn't imagine how big that one is, but human cannot deal with that. And,
Yeah, it's so much.
I think you and I were talking about this, how in the past we used to make reports. We used to mail out reports, whether it was e-health reports, whatever they were. You made these fancy reports to solve this problem, observability. And the problem with the reports is they're static before they get emailed out. And they're obsolete, they're old, they're not interactive. And if you look at one, the next day it comes, you delete it. And we're still sending them to his junk bucket, you know.
Well, Tim
But
and I, the reason I put this up, Dan, and for those of you who are watching who haven't seen this, um, Dan is actually, so Tim and I work on a product called Scouted AI, which is a way to, it's sort of an overlay type product for monitoring data. And what it does is it uses generative AI for 2 main things. Number one, we use the 13 buckets that you see here to index a customer's monitoring data into 13 different buckets that can impact reliability. And so from those buckets, we create index values, 13 index values, and those values are then deducted from a perfect reliability score. And so you can know at any time, for instance, what an application or what a network path or anything really from an IT perspective, you can know what the reliability score is for one thing normalized against another. So in other words, I'll just pick on Dan. Dan is able Dan is a customer of this product. Dan is able to use this product to see normalized reliability scores, for instance, of for instance, CoverGirl, right? He can see the score for CoverGirl at any given point in time, but he can compare it to something that's not even close to CoverGirl, like ServiceNow or a network path between data
I'm gonna interrupt you here
Yeah,
because there's
yeah,
something
please.
cool that you do that similar, that this concept of breaking this down into buckets. You're familiar with Lighthouse, but where they end and where you begin is they're an extension of the logic, the people who think a website's performing by the number of clicks, number of eyeballs. And that's where Lighthouse came in. So they touch on it. Somewhere they're getting a metric for network or latency or whatever, but that's not their main thing. It's the similar format where you've taken a scoop of stuff out of my world, processed it, and said, okay, we've made this into something consumable and relatable.
For the audience, can you talk a little bit about, you've got the score, we call it an RPI score, and you've got this sort of rolled out across what you're doing now at Coty. And then we have this interface we built, really, Tim had a huge hand in building an AI interface using Anthropic. And so, the Claude model. So he used the foundational model when he built this, and it's been trained to understand not only the RPI scoring system, but IT ops in general. So do you wanna talk a little bit about how you've been using it? You've said a couple of things that were interesting to me about who some of your eventual customers might even be to look at it. Thought the people would like to know.
Well, we broke this up into two types of groups in AppNeta, which is where you're primarily consuming the Scoutic data from. We took our old synthetic monitors. We were using an older tool for that, and we ported them all over. So basic synthetic monitors, web monitoring. That's the web groups, and then we also, our big blind spot at Coty has always been, and most firms are going to be the same way. Is the WAN. I won't use SD-WAN because that kind of pollutes it a little bit, but just that space between here and here, whatever it may be. And, traditionally you just, other than ping and latency, you really don't know anything, about it. Then we're an SD-WAN customer, and because we went with a managed SD-WAN, BT won't give us the keys to Velo. So we can't take that approach and go directly in through VNA and look at Velo or whatever. So the third approach to that is to be agnostic, is to sit back in the chair and we'll look at it from the outside. And that's what AppNeta does for us. And what I see happening, and you and I are going that direction, is, okay, you create a path in AppNeta. Just I'm from here to here. Nothing fancy, no SD-WANs, nothing else. It's going to make hops across the network on there. Some of those hops are going to be inside Coty's premises. Probably a good number of them. And you now have the ability to go into my OI and get any metrics related to those hops. What I'd really love to see is take it one step further and you have to drop a Kafka program on-prem. And then you can interact with it a lot better, I think. I think ultimately that would be really cool way to harvest it. But it gives me the ability to look at things in context. I can create a bunch of monitors that I'm going to call an SD-WAN group. And they're basically, their entire job in the world is to just talk to another site in a mesh and give me results on that. So I know how my SD-WAN is performing. And then with your tool, I can easily see which pieces of my SD-WAN and why they're not performing. Okay. If I go and I look in Performance Monitor, on that same app metadata, it's going to show me green. But I look at you and it says, no, there's more going on than meets the eye here. And I like that. That's really good. And as we're evolving in this tool at this point is making these things, instead of it host names, okay? My monitoring points are computers. They have a host name. They live on my network. But wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to deal with them like that? I already gave them a tag and gave them a name. I could call it Fred if I wanted, you know? And I would love, for purposes, again, of making that, go back to the old report days. We tried so hard to make things that were visually appealing, that were easy to consume, red light, green light, whatever, you know? And it missed. This is interactive. And I think because it's interactive, you can hook the user, whether you're hooking it visually or through text, through interactive. And I like the, I call it hooking it, but if I go on Gemini or, one of the silly things that you play with, you ask it a question, you get an answer. You ask it another question, it's totally lost the context of the previous question.
Lost context, yeah.
And I'm done at that point. I think, that was cute. That was fun to play with, Whereas here, as long as I keep that session going, I can continue to drill. And that's the way we think, Yes, I see this. Now tell me a little more. Tell me the thing my boss is going to ask me, How do I get there?
When we were putting it together, I remember Tim saying to me that he wanted to have it as a natural language model and keep that so that it could converse with you. But I did want you to know, Dan, I mean, and for those who are watching, Dan's what we call one of our beta customers for the product. And Dan has come up with this, concept that we should be using, more of a tagging system for our generative AI. And so we talked about that even this morning. So in other words, when Dan gave us that recommendation as a beta customer, we took it right back to our development meeting and we said, you know what, he's right. And we have access to all the tags.
Okay, we just got early access to an AppNeta feature for their path group editor. They're and all the path group editor does is make tags.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
And we have access to that. And so we're thinking, well, why don't we teach our AI agent that she should give some thought to recognizing tags over, just general questions. And everything, I think, Tim, if I'm correct, everything we looked at this morning says we can do that no problem, right? So we'll probably roll that out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
No, that's, just little things like that just make so much sense. Because again, I'm at a point, and this is actually good because we're at a point where my AppNeta platform is still about 2 months before I'm going to turn it over to prod.
Right. Yeah.
So I can play, which was one of the reasons I wanted to get it early. I wanted to spend the last 4 months of the year just drilling into that tool. And, so that when we do turn it over, a good example, the S&P, the monitoring standard stock, we just set up a meeting for next week. We're going to start with looking at the AppNeta perspective, network team. What do you want to know from this data? And in a notification, server team, what do you want to know? Web team, what do you want to know? And then we'll reverse engineer the notifications. We'll then come back and say, okay, this is what they want to know. And then we'll do the notification policies and stuff. So it's just another way to do it. Another thing though, is with Mother, I love that.
From the Alien movie. Yeah.
No. I think and that's okay. But I like the fact that my head exploded. That's humor. That's relatable stuff. That's not core dump, blue screen, a hex code up there, Yeah, it core dumped, and it's got a blue screen somewhere, and that's fine,
It's funny you say that because we keep hearing from customers that they like the fun mode. We call it fun mode, and we let her just sort of rip and roar a little
and
bit.
it's why they like it? Because it's relatable and it has that hook, and you'll interact with it. Even if it didn't understand what you asked and you came back with a little sarcasm and said, come on, Dan,
What were you thinking?
But no, think about that. I mean, if you can get a user to laugh, crack a smile, they'll use it again.
They'll use it again.
We're completely not even talking about content here. We're talking about whether it's a blue background or a pink background,
I'll come in the morning and I'll ask her questions about like performance overnight, and I'll text Tim and say, "Hey, she seems pretty moody this morning. Did something happen last night?" And Tim's like, "I think you're taking this a bit too far," but it's fun, you know.
But
So
you could do something like it's a full moon. It's something you can pull off the calendar, and you can make her cranky.
we never. I do
That's a good
remember
point. We
when we were
could.
talking. Tim and I said we never expected that a bunch of IT people like us, right, would actually want to have fun mode in our tools. But every customer is saying, "No, no, we like that." So
Mm-hmm. I think that's huge, and you know, yeah, it's fun, and it makes it fun for us. But think about the audience.
yeah, right.
That they're day to day dealing with tickets and dealing with incidents and dealing with mib browsers or metrics or vCenters, and to give them a little humor in finding out the fact. We're not distorting the facts. We're presenting them, with a smile, basically, and a wink.
Well, you said something one time that we've taken back, and really thought about, because we're talking on this show about observability, right? And I think inherently, guys like us or those of us in the field, I think inherently we think of IT, right? Because we're IT and we are sort of like in the business of observability. But about a month ago, as for everybody else's sake, Dan said something when we were looking at the features of Scout It and the little AI question chatbot thingy. Dan said, "You know what I think I'm going to consider in the future? I think what I'm going to do is once this is trained perfectly for Coty, I'm going to let our business owners have a login so that they can ask this AI agent, how is observability today?" And I thought, you know what? The concept of bringing business owners into IT observability and giving them full access is brilliant.
I mean, think about that manager in southern France who's sitting there, comes in the morning and says, "How is my world performing in Coty?" And he'll get his SD-WAN, he'll see his websites, he'll see his stuff, you know?
And if he just lost in the World Cup to France, I'll bet you that he will say, "How are my systems doing in comparison with the ones up in Paris?"
Right. I mean, think about it. This guy didn't know what inventory he had.
Yeah.
Whether it was server inventory, whether it was network inventory, how many access points were in the roof, no idea. And until we gave that to him, and he's just like,
Well, we just got a few minutes time left here. So Dan, this is something we didn't really warn you about, but we do this every episode. But
"I'll come back. This is fun stuff."
Hey, you're welcome to.
let me pull it up here. So we ask every guest, whether they're IT or musician or both. In this case, you're both. But we have every guest to do two things just so that we sort of can connect the dots someday on music, and the other third circle is actually sports cars, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But of the previous two episodes, Sheenam from Broadcom and your good buddy Jeremy, we asked them if to think about the scenario that you've been washed up on a deserted island, and even though we want to think that you're going to make it home to the goats, right? We also want to consider the possibility that you'll be on the island for a long time. So we ask everybody, what are the three things? Now these you can't pick like a way to get a boat to get home. You have to
I have item number one, but I don't know if it'll fit in the box.
okay. No, that's okay because a piano didn't fit. Yeah, but
Okay. I have 100 gig soundboard library of Grateful Dead shows.
Oh, wow. We
Um,
definitely need to talk then.
Right.
That's awesome.
so comfort,
I may be on
so
that island
comfort
with you.
item number one.
So I'll need the drive and a method to get it, and method to play it on my phone somehow, and a solar panel to keep it all working.
Well, we're going to pretend that you have all the battery life you'll ever need. So you're wanting 100 gigs of Grateful Dead music?
Oh, I have it. It's right there.
Okay.
It's like I've got 60 shows, 70 shows. It's all by year. Yeah.
This is music, audio or video or both?
For video, I just go in Nugs. It's too, why run your own server anymore? And in fact, I think Nugs took over Archive, or the Dead's Archive. I believe they did. Oh.
I certainly like number one because you're going to have a lot to listen to with 100 vehicles. All right, what's your second comfort? Just a comfort item. Could be food, could be anything.
Oh man, I don't eat that much.
I've got one I'm going to add for you at the end. I've got one I was thinking that you would say, but go ahead and let me hear number 2 and 3.
Let me think about that. I'm gonna need a goat.
That's
one
what
of
I
the
was
goats?
thinking. At
I'm
least
gonna
a
need
goat,
a
because then you
goat.
have cheese. Yeah.
Well, you want at
Right.
least two, right? So you
At
can
least two
continue
goats.
it. Okay,
Right.
all right.
A male and a female goat.
There you go.
All right, number 3. This is your last
Oh
comfort item.
man, my last comfort item: a good bottle of rum.
There you go. Why the rum?
Good bottle of rum. We're talking $200-300 bottle. Actually, it's funny. My daughter works for a company called Co-Brand. They're an importer of wines from France and Italy and stuff. They also import spirits, but their primary business is fine wines. And so she's a sommelier, grand sommelier. She's trained in France and stuff. And so I asked her questions. If I go buy a bottle of wine, I FaceTime her from the wine store. So anyway, I asked her. I said, "Why would I buy a $1,500 bottle of rum?" I was looking on a website the other day, and she goes, "Don't worry, Dad, you will."
Yeah. One
Some of
day
those
you
good-
will.
Some of those good old rums, those are great.
Mm-mm.
All right, so we've got your 3 items. So now the final thing is I'll show you what's happened in the first 2 episodes with Sheenam and Jeremy.
Well, I was going to say, Tony, maybe you want to wait until the end so it's not a biased opinion.
That's a great point. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me move down here quickly. Okay. So let me set you up, Dan. In honor of the goats, what we've done here is we have 2 vehicles. We have the only death match for Ferrari and Maserati on any podcast. So Tim and I can't eat. We keep saying if we don't get a sponsor, so we're hoping Maserati or Ferrari one will step up, right? But what you see here are 2, one Maserati, one Ferrari. I've removed the symbol so you can't tell who they are. And both of them are capable
Tony,
of...
Tony,
Look up.
look at
up,
his
Tony.
screen.
That's they wipe them both off the road.
Oh, the Triumph. Yeah, no, I have my screen
Yeah.
blocked. I couldn't see it.
Okay.
Nice. I know you love
Your butt is
Triumph.
about that far off the road. It's
I'm-
got
yeah.
20-inch
20-inch,
wheels. It's got
right.
a straight 6 with 2 Stromberg carbs with the leather, baffles and stuff.
Okay.
It's a wood dash, beautiful wood dash. The traffic
Nice.
lights. You know how on the old electronic equipment the round lights used to glow?
Yep.
The traffic indicator is called a trafficator.
Traffic
glows.
Nice.
Yes.
I think
Super
what we're going
cool.
to do next season, Tim, next season, we're going to have a Jaguar Triumph death match. all
There you go.
season.
Yeah, that'll work.
And
That works.
Dan can be our special judge. So
Yeah, there you go, Dan.
Let's see.
Okay,
I'd take
Dan.
the out of those cookie cutter cars that look like they were pressed out of a machine. I
have
got
to
this
pick
thing
one.
that I make pasta with that I could probably make ones that look like
one
that.
of these, right?
Yeah.
But you
3D
have to
printer,
pick
right?
one. You have to pick one. Which one will you take?
Oh boy,
Come on.
I'm not. I can't do it.
You got to pick
Flip a
one.
coin, heads or tails.
I don't like green, so we'll take the gray one, the silver one.
All right, so what you got, Tony? Oh, he still picked a Ferrari.
Still pick the Ferrari.
So now show him the results of the other one. So Tony, if you could tell by his background, is a huge Maserati fan.
He's
Unfortunately,
trying.
nobody's
He's
picked
got a
it yet.
picture. He's got the picture right behind him. I know. Yeah.
This was Sheenam's choice, and she chose
The Ferrari.
Good choice. Good
This was
choice.
Jeremy's choice, and he chose
The Ferrari.
the Ferrari. This was Dan's choice, and he chose the Ferrari.
I guess
Thank
I'm
you,
not
Dan.
getting invited back. Huh?
Nope, that
you're
was it.
back anytime.
You're done.
I'll tell you one thing I want for sure is when the babies are born, come back for one show and do it down at
with
your
the baby in my.
barn.
No, I'll bring the
baby.
babies up to the
You
house.
bring the baby up. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Well, Dan, we can't thank you enough. This has been a treat, and to learn from you from so many years, and just what you've seen is amazing. So thank
Yeah,
you.
it's
And
awesome.
we have a little feature at the end. The outro is played by Tim, which is exciting. He's a heck of a guitar player.
Awesome.
So, Tim, I
Thank
thought
you,
this
thank you.
time I'd just sort of shock you, surprise you, and not give you a heads up and ask you for a guitar solo to do the outro. Are you game?
Always.
Okay. I would like for you to play for our outro today, David Gilmour's version of Time from
Done.
Pink Floyd.
That's
Can
Yeah.
you do it?
anytime you want
yeah,
to play
yeah.
that. That's a wonderful, good one.
All right, everybody. Thank you. We're going to leave today with Tim playing the outro, Time from Pink Floyd, everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.